Hey, it's Memento. Welcome and thank you for dropping by on my first video. It means a lot. And just before we delve into the main part of the video, I would like to give a brief introduction to the channel. The purpose of this channel is to build an environment where we can help each other grow to our best versions. When it comes to growth, I'm a strong advocate that if we look deep within ourselves, that we already possess great qualities. And I support the approach that if you feel you're not quite where you want to be with it, that it's achievable by nurturing and working on a certain quality you would like to have, rather than taking what I believe a toxic approach that I often see drilled by many self improvement groups, which is looking at yourself as a completely broken person, and that if you don't completely change your lifestyle to a certain way, you are essentially failing life. In the long run, I feel that this is not only counterproductive, but it also creates an unhealthy relationship with oneself. I am convinced that if we grow as people, we can significantly increase our chances to achieve our life goals, to have healthier and happier relationships, not only with those around you, but as importantly with yourself. If this approach resonates with you, then I hope you can be part of this community that we're building. I'll be getting the community going by sharing content here that I hope is invaluable, educational, but also delivering it in a fun and unique way.
This video will be split into two parts. First half, I'm going to be talking about COD, recent games, what I felt the best COD has been in the last few years, which is going to be quite interesting as I feel I have a very controversial opinion to the majority of people. Then the second half of this video will be on mental health. The content is both driven by the data and the scientific literature rather than it being an opinion based, much like the first part of the video. And just to clarify, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having or sharing opinions, but I feel it's important to separate that when going over advice and information, or at least emphasizing it. More specifically, I will be hoping to emphasize and raise awareness to our concerning low levels of treatment and understanding towards mental health in general. Why it would be important now more than ever to educate yourself about mental health, as well as sharing a good starting point by going over some definitions. But hopefully, most importantly, giving you some tools to further your own understanding. I will be also analysing the extremely concerning statistics on mental health. Then lastly, discussing effective but simple ways you could become more helpful to others and yourself when you're struggling mentally. I will be putting timestamps to the different sections, so you're more than welcome to skip to the parts you're interested in. However, I would like to clarify my logic behind this, as I've chosen this order for a reason. I feel the first half it would allow us to relax and ease in before getting into a more serious conversation by laughing at my COD skills because I'm not filtering any of it. So you will see my occasional highs and my many lows. A good way to unwind, as I'm sure you may have had a rather long day. Of course, I also understand if you're not a gamer or you just can't deal with my terrible gaming skills, you're time restrained, or whatever reason, there doesn't have to be one and you can go ahead and skip to the second section. Please note for this video at least, there's a gameplay in the background. There'll be shots of the statistical graphs and the sections of the different literature that I use for this video. However, this is also not a gaming channel, so there'll be a variety of different videos in the future. I know the introduction was rather long, but I had to introduce the channel, and this is a pretty big video, so I just wanted to provide a little outline to help you see what to expect. Anyways, this will be a good time to grab yourself your favorite drink or snack to indulge in. Right now, I'm just sipping on a cuppa, so join me. So, COD. If any of you play COD way back, I'm talking about COD 4, the way up to Modern Warfare 2, and of course most of the Black Ops. How different and not different the CODs we've had in recent times. A bit of a weird thing to say, but hear me out. So when I mean different and not different, it's that the COS formula has been pretty consistent. You know, the main focus being the 6v6, which has been around for a long time. Obviously, recently we've had Warzone being the sort of biggest shift away from that, and what appears to have been killing the sort of standard multiplayer, the 6v6 that many of us fell in love with. Where some of its differences have come from, you know, the skill-based matchmaking and the disbanding lobbies and how heavily commercialized, orientated that, you know, slowly become throughout the years. I really didn't play much COD when it became like that, you know, with that supply drop stuff and like the Black Ops. Didn't really play the multiplayer much because yeah, just paying to win just puts me off any games in general.
And more significantly, COD just doesn't feel the same, at least to me. And this might be because I'm not a kid or a teenager anymore, so that sort of special type of thrill that you get as a young like chap may have just like faded away. But in a way, recently I've been enjoying video games a lot more, appreciating them more so than I did when I was younger. And they get me as excited in a way. So, but I don't know. But it would be interesting to know if in that case that if any of you watching and let's say 16 and under, and the last four CODs are the first ones you're playing, how do they make you feel? Like, does each year feel like refreshing and exciting? Does it make you like, as soon as you hear that bell ring at school, does it make you want to leg it home from school and whack it on as soon as you can? Because it sure did make me do that back in my time. Actually, I don't know who I'm gassing here. Um, that'll be that'll be kind of a lie. My mum was one of those parents that wouldn't allow you to game during the weekdays, but can't lie, that didn't stop me. I'll just play anyways. When my mum was in and when she wasn't in. Um, and my brother or something, I don't know, but it came to light that I was playing during time when I was meant to play, and it got to a point where my mum would have to hide my PlayStation or Xbox. And I say hide, but my mum did not know how to hide things. I don't know if she just didn't notice how bad she was at hiding things, or just she just thought I was really stupid. Probably the latter, but anyways, I had the last laugh because it made no difference. So her hiding it was kind of pointless, but I obviously never told her that. At times, I was really tempted to just tell her how bad like she was hiding things because it was just so funny. Like literally, it would be in a corner of a room and not even be covered up. And let's say my mum chose to hide it in the kitchen and we were having dinner, I would have to try really hard to like not look at it and then burst out laughing, honestly. And this is exactly why so many people say I don't show any emotion sometimes when I speak.
And now to answer the big question of the first part of the video, what COD would I consider to be the best in recent years? And I just want to clarify, this is my personal opinion. So yeah, here we go. I might have a few people calling for my head on a spike, but I really enjoyed Cold War. Not that my background gameplay gave it away or anything. I hope I didn't trigger some of you too much by just saying that. But just hear me out, please. So, for me, Cold War made me feel the closest to reliving to those golden years of COD that I had as a young fella. By no means am I an expert or a pro at the game, so my opinion is quite biased. I'm being very honest with you. But let's start with the gameplay. To me, it ran really smooth, and it gave me that same sort of feeling from a good old tryout multiplayer. It was boots on the ground after so many years of exo boosts, exo jumps, and exo teleportation. You get what I mean. I don't know what they're called exactly. And no offense to those who like those little boost things. It may be very well for you, but as a personal opinion, it didn't slap for me, and it was so far away from the roots of a COD game. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for improvement and changes, but I think you have to be careful. It doesn't impact its core strengths, and you swing away too far away, and it become a completely different game. And I feel there's other game producers who are, in my opinion, superior at future warfare. And when we look at the criticisms on Cold War, and one that I can really empathise with is that Cold War didn't have that many maps at launch, which is probably one of its biggest drawbacks, if not the biggest. However, the maps that they had were, I thought, fantastic. And if you ask me, I'd rather pick quality over quantity, especially if it's just going to be for the sake of it. We've seen it before where they've just filled content, but it's just for the sake of it. It's just mediocre. Overall, I felt the maps were fast paced. I felt it gave you a chance to play different game styles. See, for me personally, I play quite a not controversial. I probably a confident. I can't even English right now.
As no, I promise, like, and even it's been a weird these past few months, and knowing out.
I play quite an aggressive and confrontational style, and I didn't feel like I was getting unfairly punished by some sweaty campers sitting in a corner of a room.
I briefly mentioned earlier on the video about skill-based matchmaking and disbanding lobbies, and I often see this as one of its biggest, or if not biggest, criticisms on Cold War, and I think this is a bit unjust. Yeah, Cold War was awful with this, but I think it's important to point out that this wasn't an exclusive problem with Cold War, or that Cold War itself created this issue, but actually looking at it as a general issue with all the recent and future CODs, it seems. Unfortunately, it's just the direction that Activision are taking as a whole. And lastly, before I go off on about COD, and perhaps in future videos I'll cover certain topics about it, but when we talk about what makes a great COD game, I think it's very important to include zombies to this discussion. And I might not be the best person to give an informed opinion on Cold War Zombies specifically, as I didn't really get around to playing as much as I wanted to. Because when I did play COD, I was playing solo, and I get too shit to play scary games on my own. However, the times I did step up and be a big boy about it, or I did get around to playing it with some mates, it's probably the best zombies experience I've had since Black Ops 3. I mean, just look at the state of Vanguard zombies. It's a shit and pace of Cold War, and that even is reaching. I think it's even worse. It was really disappointing to see this, because the trailer did look alright, and it seemed like it was making some positive continuation from Cold War Zombies somewhat. But yeah, zombies, I just feel has probably been the area that's been hit the hardest, and I truly feel for the zombies community. The new zombies have been mediocre, and they've been so dry for so long. I just start reminiscing of the good times from like many years ago. I feel a lot of people will be in the same boat as me when I say that. I remember playing Knights of the Totem, the very first Call of Duty zombie map, and my first one ever too. And I just remember it taking me by complete surprise, like completing this campaign, and then bang, there's a zombies mode just coming out of nowhere. I was really confused, but I played it, and we never looked back since. And what's funny is that Knights of the Totem map was originally a side project from a few developers, and there was a good chance it was never going to make the final cut. They never envisioned it to become what it is now. And I just sometimes just sit and imagine and think, wow, what if it didn't make the final cut, and COD would be a completely different game to me. I already mentioned how scared I get by playing zombies alone, but this is how good zombies was. I was willing to continue playing, even though I was pissing my pants the whole time. another reason why I brought zombies into the conversation is that COD used to be a game that unified a wide range of gamers to love one singular game. But now with Warzone being Treyarch's 100% full fat cash cow, it comes to no surprise to see them milk this one to absolute hell and see other core components of COD go to the dumpster. This isn't uncommon to see, as many businesses, where the money is, that's where the resource and focus end up diverging, and end up forgetting what was there at the beginning. I enjoyed Warzone, particularly at its launch. It came at a time where people were stuck at home, and having something refreshing and exciting was great. But it's just so sad to see that's meant that the original components of COD are being heavily neglected and perhaps unrecoverable. I think we'll truly see if this is the case by whatever COD is released next. And yeah, so this wraps up the first part of the video, and it'll be really great to see what your opinions are and what your favourite COD has been recently and why, and any other comments are welcome. It could be you're a terrible gamer, you're terrible at CODs, it could be anything. It's all welcome.
Now, before getting into the second half and the main focus of this video, take this as a reminder to refill whatever drink or snack you're indulging earlier on, if you were, and if you just skipped to this part of the video, yeah, why not? I'm gonna fill up another cuppa. Bloody love tea. Anyways, just an overview of what to expect in the next section of the video. I'll be going over some definitions, followed up by a discussion about the staggering data and statistics on mental health. Lastly, going over to some professional advice to help a friend and yourself.
Mental health is something that we all have, and just like our physical health, it is important for us to ensure we keep it healthy. Even gaining the slightest of education on mental health can mean the difference of saving someone's health or your own. On average, our knowledge of mental health is considerably low, and that's why unfortunately so many people go without or delaying their treatment. I hope that doesn't come across me judging, because I really want to emphasize this, as this was very true in my case. It was one of the biggest reasons why it took much longer than it needed to for me to get better. No one should go through this long process, because mental health doesn't get better on its own, and it requires special attention and care.
If you are watching this and you're starting to learn about mental health or wanting to, one way of starting is by reading over the most up-to-date and credible definitions. I began like this, and I felt it gave me a quick and basic understanding, and it also helped me to start distinguishing important differences. I'll quickly go over some definitions to start some of you off. So apologies to anyone who's already familiar with the following, but I hope it gives you a quick summary or something new. So let's begin with a definition on mental health. I like this definition, and it comes from the World Psychiatry. It states the following: mental health is a dynamic state of internal equilibrium which enables individuals to use their abilities in harmony with universal values of society. Basic cognitive and social skills, ability to recognize, express, and modulate one's emotions, as well as empathize with others. Flexibility and ability to cope with adverse life events and function in social roles, and harmonious relationship between body and mind represent important components of mental health which contribute to varying degrees to the state of internal equilibrium. The article where I found this definition also contains some interesting criticisms to other widely known definitions, such as the one from the World Health Organization, one that most probably have seen, and from Keys or Case. I don't think I've pronounced that right. So, for example, the WHO's definition describes mental health as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. One of the issues that the article argues about this definition is that some life events being in a state of well-being, in other words, happy or comfortable, can in fact be unhealthy. Let's take a soldier who is under orders to kill in an act of war. Being in a state of well-being whilst doing this would be odd, and quite frankly, the opposite of mentally healthy. If we now look at a definition of mental illness, it can be described as a syndrome categorized by clinically significant disturbance in an individual's cognition, emotion regulation, or behavior that reflects a dysfunction in the psychological, biological, or development process underlying mental functioning. Mental disorders are usually associated with significant distress or disability in social, occupational, or other important activities. An expectable or culturally approved response to a common stressor or loss, such as the death of a loved one, is not a mental disorder. Socially deviant behavior, e.g., political, religious, or sexual, and conflicts that are primarily between the individual and society are not mental disorders, unless the deviance or conflict results from a dysfunction in the individual, as described above. This definition comes from the latest Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, 5th edition, and those who are unfamiliar with the DSM for short, the DSM contains description, symptoms, and other criteria for diagnosis. It is widely used in the research and academic fields such as by clinicians and psychiatrists around the world, some of which treat it as a Bible and some as a guide.
An interesting yet slightly concerning observation is the fact that there's so much debate on definitions. It really emphasizes how our understanding on mental health could be very young, and there still remains so much to learn. Now, what are your thoughts on this? Is this something to be concerned about? Personally, right now, I would say no. Our knowledge and understanding with everything is always constantly changing, but it cannot go without saying that when it comes to mental health, we have been lagging behind for a long time. So it's really important that we take the necessary measures to catch up.
To really stress how prevalent mental illness is, we can begin by looking at the data on a global scale. An article written by Saloni and colleagues analyzes a variety of relationships using data published by the Institute of Health Metrics, which is the only source that provides estimates for all countries over time and across a full range of mental health and substance use disorders. It is estimated that in 2017, 729 million people of the world population lived with a mental illness. Another way to put this into perspective, just over 1 in 10 people lived with a mental illness. The article heavily emphasizes to take the numbers with almost a pinch of salt, as is a widespread issue of underreporting. Accurate and representative data on the prevalence of disorders is difficult to define. The prevalence figures are likely to reflect healthcare spending rather than giving a representative perspective on differences between countries. High-income countries would likely show significantly higher prevalence as a result of more diagnoses. There's 2 interesting points I deducted from this section of this article. Firstly, the reported number of people living with a mental health illness between different countries is likely to be skewed by how much a country has been able to invest into mental health care rather than other potential variables. For example, countries with lower incomes, their data on mental health is likely to be inaccurate, as mental health is less of a priority due to such factors, including, but not limited to, cultural pressures, lower levels of healthcare, and more stigma on mental health. Secondly, the more obvious point here is that there is a worldwide underestimation of the actual number of people living with mental health illness, which the current estimate is already concerning. I will be making sure to leave links to the materials I've used in the video so that if you're interested in any of the information that I've lightly gone over, you're more than welcome to go over them in more detail. I can appreciate it when I say it like that. It doesn't sound fun, but it really is interesting. And trust me, the amount of boring academic materials that I've read, I think I'm gathering the idea of what is boring to read. Just moments ago, I went over a couple of definitions, but there are many more. And if you'd like to learn more, then you can literally do this by searching for the most widely accepted definition of whatever you're trying to find. Other thing to bear in mind when you're doing your own study is to ensure that what you're reading is coming from a credible source. If you aren't too sure how to, a few pointers would be: firstly, check the authors, see if the article contains references, if it comes from an established publisher, and generally avoid blogs and Q&A forums. Not that there's anything wrong with them, there's just no way of knowing what is written there is correct, as it doesn't have the same evaluation process that academic materials do. Another point I would like to talk about is the importance of sharing or discussing your opinions with like-minded people, in the sense that those people are open-minded and willing to listen to other opinions, and not like-minded by choosing to only speak to people who share your opinion. Discussing openly with a variety of people exposes you to new thoughts, to build further on the ones you've already formed, or even change them completely. I say all of this because if you're anything like me, I used to feel that I needed to be extremely educated and knowledgeable to share my opinion or even have one. This is completely not the case. I personally still, however, feel that it's important to educate yourself to a basic level on anything before you begin to formulate opinions or speak out, but definitely don't silence your thoughts. In this next part of the video, I would like to go over the importance of how having the ability to recognize mental ill health and knowing effective preventative measures has on potentially saving someone's life or your own. But just before I do, if you feel any of the information from here onward relates to you, please do not use this as a type of diagnosis, because the process is more complicated than this. The first main obstacle is that I'm not a professional, and another obstacle is that each person has to be looked at an individual level. No two people behave in exactly the same way when they're unwell, and there's so many obvious factors why you should not take this as a diagnosis. If you feel like you or someone you may know be relating to what is being discussed here, please seek professional help as soon as possible. Or if it's about someone else, encourage and support them to do so. Before learning to recognize mental ill health, it is crucial to understand how mental health works. Mental health is not just the absence of mental illness. It is not quite as rigid as is commonly thought, or at least at one point it was. A good way to illustrate what I'm saying is by looking at the mental health continuum model. You may find the older models where mental health was simply seen as a single horizontal continuum, where one end would be mentally healthy and the other mentally unwell. However, the most up-to-date model takes into account the understanding that mental health is simply not the absence of mental illness. The model has two continua on different axes. We can all be found in the axes and can move around at any given time. The horizontal axis shows status of diagnosis, and the vertical shows whether someone's current mental health and well-being is healthy or poor. The continuum model helps us to understand that mental health can always change. But how can you identify and help someone or yourself when shifting in the direction of the minimal mental well-being?
So on screen we have some general symptoms that someone with mental ill health could experience, such as feeling sad or down, confused thinking or reduced ability to concentrate, excessive fears or worries, or extreme feelings of guilt, extreme mood changes of highs and lows, and so on. Sometimes symptoms of mental ill health can also manifest as physical problems too. such as stomach pain, back pain, headaches, or other unexplained aches and pains. Please note that the listed symptoms are not all the symptoms that someone with mental ill health may experience. In the same way that if you do relate to these symptoms, it does not mean that the cause is coming from a mental illness. Now, I generally feel this next part of the video covers some preventative measures that if it was more encouraged, I strongly believe we would see great positive results to improving everyone's mental health. Now, with that being said, we are more likely to see changes in someone we care about before professionals get a chance to. Therefore, in many instances, we act as their first point of contact. So, by first learning to become more watchful and considerate of one another, it will enable us to play an effective part as a first point of contact for someone who's struggling mentally. It is not saying to be overly observant or you have to spend lots of time analysing someone, but just making sure at times to remember to take an extra moment to pay attention to some of the signs we went over earlier. And if you don't get to see or speak to that person often, just check in time to time. So what if you've been trusted to be in a position to help someone that has began to share some of their thoughts and feelings with you? You can start by letting them know that you appreciate them for sharing these thoughts with you, and they do not have to talk about anything that makes them feel uncomfortable. If they respond well to this, additionally, you can ensure to offer and set aside genuine time with no distractions. It's very reassuring for someone to speak about something personal if the person appears that they want to listen to them. Remain as open and non-judgmental as possible. At times, it's easy to not notice that you may have been speaking in that way. Listen thoroughly to what they have to say. Sometimes being a pair of ears for someone is exactly what they needed at that instance. You also don't have to feel pressured to give out advice. So instead, just remain positive and reassure them that things will be okay. Don't try to diagnose or correct them because it can do more harm than good unless you're a mental health professional. Acting as you usually do is very important. It really helps the person to remain comfortable. Do not force any conversations or questions you do not want to talk about. Another great way to help is to generally offer to help with some practical errands like shopping. This can ease off a lot of pressure as the little things can become very difficult to do. Lastly, it can be distressing to find out someone you care about is going through a tough time, so make sure you look after yourself. The same way you can make yourself available to others that we just discussed, it is as important to confide in someone you can trust if you're going through something mentally. I will be also looking to do a video in the future discussing in detail on ways you can improve your own mental health and many more videos surrounding this topic. Unfortunately, this means that we've reached the end of the video and perhaps, fortunately for some of you, just wondering when is this guy going to shut up, and shutting up I am going to do in just a moment and your peace can be restored. But on a serious note, I cannot thank you enough for making it to the end of my first video. I hope this video was fun and that you could take something away from it. Again, I will be leaving links to any of the sources that I used and also links to different mental health services. It has truly been my pleasure, and if you have any comment or question, please drop them down below and let's get this community active. Let's get this conversation going. I hope to see you in the next video, but until then, remember that there's always someone that will always listen to you, and also, as importantly, to be on the lookout for someone that would appreciate being heard. This has been Aumento, and see you soon.
Artillery awaiting target coordinates.
Taking Alpha.
Counter spy plane ready for deployment.
Charlie. Securing A. Wrap it up and let's go home. Looks like we got the bastards. All squad members RTB.
Who fucking ride?